and even criminal matters. We're here to bring out the injustice in our system and fight for those who need to be fought for. I'm getting started on a few things this month. One of the things that we mentioned at our last meeting is the petitions to recall the corrupt judges. When I was printing off petitions today, I discovered I had run out of ink. So that's going to have to wait for another day. Things happen. When I was printing off those petitions, I decided that I don't think recalling them is going to be enough. I think we need a petition to have a criminal investigation. So I'm going to have my captains take that petition around also, and it will be on Facebook as well. So our first speaker today is Sabrina Dewey. Please welcome her.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We, a small representation of the people, gather today in this historic building for one purpose. We are here today to unite and fight for our God-given rights, which led our beautiful nation's founding fathers to create a government not to give rights, only God can do that, not to allow rights, that is not their place. Our government was created to protect the rights we inherently have. Thomas Jefferson so beautifully stated on July 4th, 1776, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We are gathered in grief, concern, and for some of us, fear. We unite in our grief over the children that have been taken, the families that have been ripped apart, and the gross abuse of power asserted on us by the judgment and poor decision-making of our government that's designed to protect us. John Jay in 1794 stated, "Justice is indiscriminately due to all, without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank. Yet thousands of parents, children, and families are denied basic justice and basic human rights to familial association." I'd like to talk a little bit about the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Section 1 states, "The right of the people to be secure in their home, in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." The 14th Amendment is similar. That states, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws." Not only does the U.S. Constitution care about our rights, but the United States Supreme Court has addressed this in several published opinions. In the case of L versus United States Immigration and Customs from 2018, their opinion stated, "The interest of parents in the care, custody, and control of their children is perhaps the oldest of fundamental liberty interests." In Troxel v. Granville in 2000, they stated, "The Constitution protects the fundamental right of parents to make decisions concerning the care, custody, upbringing, management, and control of their children." In MLB versus SLJ in 1996, they stated, "The right to familial association is sheltered against the government's unwarranted usurpation, disregard, or disrespect." Duke University published an article called "Storming the Castle to Save the Children." Their conclusion, after studying multiple cases where removal of children had occurred, was that even though removing a child isn't beating them, removing a child is a form of violence. We've talked law, now let's talk science. In your brain, when your nerves send signals from whatever part of your body that there is perceived pain somewhere, the insula and anterior cingulate cortex are consistently activated. These are structures within the lower part of your prefrontal cortex. These regions are also responsible for social pain. When a small child is removed from their biological family, it is perceived in their extremely underdeveloped brain as an act of violence. Child protection, as defined by Minnesota's Department of Human Services on their website, states, Minnesota has various programs to help children who may not be in safe environments. County and tribal child protection workers work with families to prevent child maltreatment, or in some cases, work with the courts and law enforcement to remove children from the home if they are in harm's way. Child protection is a government agency. What is required to seize a person? Let's review the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people is to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, or persons or things to be seized. Seizure, as defined by Oxford's dictionary, is the action of capturing someone or something using force. Probable cause is constitutionally required to legally seize a child, or in DHS terms, remove them from the home. This is a seizure as they are taken into state custody, usually with law enforcement being their guide of permission. Under the United States Constitution, a 72-hour hold is illegal, bail warrant. What is terrifying is that our government is not pursuing warrants. How many of you in this audience have had children, either your own or in loved one's care, that have been removed by child protection? Please keep your hand raised if there was a warrant involved. No one. According to criminal law, kidnapping is the unlawful confinement of a person against their will, often including transportation. Minor children do not have the legal authority to consent, or bringing the child to the doctor or school or the dentist be considered kidnapping. Who has the right and the authority for that transportation? The parent. Once again, the right of the people is to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effect against unreasonable searches and seizures. And as the 14th Amendment states, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Due process, as it relates to seizure of a person, whether to jail or state custody of any form, including child protection, involves a properly issued warrant. If a government agency is not obtaining warrants, they are not following due process, and this makes any and all seizures illegal. Yet this happens in our beautiful state every single day. Somehow, that's not all. Illegal seizures are not the end of the road for hundreds of Minnesota parents. According to state statutes, by day 311 of the CHIPS petition, which is Children in Need of Protective Services, which is foster care, the entire point of that is reunification, the agency is required by April Huffman to submit a termination of parental rights petition if they feel they cannot return the child. For my case, this was done on day 311 at 7 o'clock at night. Some of the state statutes on how they justify that includes if a parent has to break consent to terminate their own rights, called an involuntary termination, or if several different conditions exist, including refusing or neglecting to comply with duties imposed by the parent and child relationship, that a parent has been continued to contribute to the support of a child financially and has continued to fail to do so, that a parent is palpably unfit to be a party of the parent and child relationship because of a consistent pattern of specific conduct before the child or of specific conditions directly relating to the parent and child relationship, which are determined by the court to be basically unfixable for the foreseeable future. Or, following that child's placement out of the home, reasonable efforts have failed. It is presumed that reasonable efforts have failed if the child has resided out of the home for more than 12 months in the previous 22 months, if the court has approved the out-of-home placement plan required under statute 260C.0212, 260C.212, and filed with the court, conditions leading to out-of-home placement have not been corrected. It is presumed that this is the case upon showing that the parent or parents have not substantially complied with the case plan given by the agency. Reasonable efforts also have to be made by the social services agency. There are also other statutes that address chemical dependency, if a child's been neglected in foster care, or if a child has experienced egregious harm in the parent's care, which is of a nature, duration, or chronicity that indicates a lack of regard for the child's well-being, such that a reasonable person would believe it is contrary to the best interest for that child or children, or any child or children, to be in the parent's care. If the parent has been convicted of specific crimes, that also constitutes. However, even with these different situations, Subdivision 7 where the best interests of the parent and child conflict, the child's interests are paramount. So we talked a little bit about reasonable efforts. Reasonable efforts are slightly defined by Minnesota State statutes in 260.012. Once a child is alleged to be in need of child protective services, this is typically when the CHIPS case is initiated. The court shall ensure that the agency provides reasonable efforts to the family. These can involve different things such as therapy, classes, other forms of education. If a parent is struggling with income, maybe the parent can get a job, a vehicle, etc. There is no timeline listed in these statutes for providing services. Families on average wait over 3 months from the date that their children are removed from their home to even get a checklist of what the agency wants done to consider reunification and returning the children. Parents under Minnesota State statute can completely comply with every single aspect of a case plan and essentially be told in a court order, sorry, wasn't enough. Even after the guardian ad litem, social workers, and the judge concur that the case plan was not only substantially completed under Minnesota State statute, but was entirely completed. This happened to me. I and my 3 children are victims of child protective services in Isani County. We are victims of judicial abuse. There were a total of 6 investigations into my family, 3 law enforcement and 3 child protection investigations. They deemed that some of my children had suffered child abuse, but they could never find a single perpetrator for any of the injuries, couldn't even provide a timeline for the vast majority of them. There was not one scrap of evidence as to who hurt my children. They did determine in 2020 that their dad was guilty of maltreatment. However, in that situation, no direct injury occurred to my daughter. They gave us a case plan in 2020. We completed it. They closed the case and walked away. In 2021, they returned due to a speculative report of potential abuse. This report also included concerns for medical neglect and possible marijuana use around the children. Neither of these concerns met anywhere near the state statute for what constitutes a concern, because the medical neglect was a concern that my 8-week-old daughter had not had her 2-month well child check. These are not required, these are suggested. These additional concerns, because they never came close, were straight out. The social worker who removed my children have been full-time staff with the agency for 3 days. I, to this day, have never been charged with anything more than a speeding ticket in 2018. I have never been found guilty of child abuse, child neglect, child endangerment. I have never been charged with a crime of those egregious acts, and I was quoted in a state court order terminating my parental rights as, quote, providing excellent care to the children, unquote. The court order also stated that I completed my case plan, my children were attached to me, and went as far as to specify that my youngest daughter, who was nursing at 8 weeks old when she was removed, had a strong and bonded attachment. They also stated that I had an attachment to my children and that I was engaged and involved in the children's care throughout the 18 months of the CHIPS case. I was never offered unsupervised visitation, never offered additional visitation, never offered any visitation expansion. The agency claimed they provided reasonable efforts, citing that they provided reasonable services. Criteria of what reasonable efforts includes: reunify the child with the parent or guardian from whom the child was removed, use of culturally appropriate and available services to meet the individualized needs of the child and child's family. My children were removed in March of 2021. By August of 2021, the case plan had been completed. The agency proceeded to not offer any additional services. They did not offer any additional visitation, and in fact, continuously took away visitation hours until February on day 311, when they finally decided to file a termination petition. I begged the agency for a safety plan and went as far as creating my own, which the agency refused to use, seriously consider, or expand on. They additionally refused to reach out to dozens of individuals that I had signed releases of information for during the investigation, which is required by state law that they consider all available and pertinent information, and throughout the case. I completed all services and initiated many additional services on my own. 2 social workers and 2 guardian ad litems testified under oath that there was nothing else I could have done to prevent a termination petition. Minnesota statute 260.302 subdivision 1, section 5, number 3, conditions leading to the out-of-home placement have not been corrected. It is presumed that conditions leading to a child's out-of-home placement have not been corrected upon a showing that the parent has not substantially complied with the court orders and a reasonable case plan, and reasonable efforts have been made by the social services agency to reunify the family. Minnesota Statute 260.012, subdivision D, section 1. The agency has made reasonable efforts to prevent the placement of the child in foster care by working with the family to implement and develop a safety plan that is individualized to the needs of the child and child's family and may include support persons from the child's extended family, kin network, or community. Reading through the lines, I was set up to lose no matter what. My 2-year-old cried at the last visit where I was given 30 minutes to say goodbye to her and her 1-year-old sister. I want to go home. These comments were made during thousands of hours of supervised visits. The agency once stated in a court report it wasn't in the visitation notes, so we upped the documentation and ensured that it was. She wanted her mom. My 6-year-old, who was given a mere 30 minutes as well to say goodbye, sat in my arms for 20 of those minutes and sobbed as she had been informed by a social worker the day before of what was taking place. On the morning of December 2nd, 2022, I sobbed for hours as I packed up totes and bags and boxes of my children's belongings. I was given 30 minutes to say goodbye to each of my children by a therapist who has to this day been unable to provide any scientific-based evidence or any insight as to why 30 minutes was developmentally appropriate or even a good idea. My dog recently had puppies. Separating them from their mother at 30 minutes old, or 5 weeks, or 6 weeks is wrong, detrimental, and potentially illegal. We are treating children worse than dogs. Our laws and lack of oversight by departments such as the Board of Social Work and the Department of Health and Human Services allow this, and our children deserve better. I'd like to close with a quote. The state must declare the child to be the most precious treasure of the people. As long as the government is perceived as working for the benefit of the children, the people will happily endure almost any curtailment of liberty and almost any deprivation. Adolf Hitler.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, that's all I can say. It really angers me to see what's happening and just how far us as a nation we have fallen. But most of all, for us as believers, and I know that is not here because you guys are pretty active and you guys are pretty committed to spreading the gospel, but also committed to this, to what Jesus says about us to go and to make disciples of all nations, and that entails of us going and being part of all of these entities that literally exist. So it's just an encouragement, and I continue to pray for you guys, and especially Sabrina. Just watching that, like I cannot imagine any of my kids ever being taken away from us. Like I don't know what I would do, and it's just not something that, yeah, and the world's changing and it's getting harder, but fortunately the Lord is in control, and you and I can continue to just rest in that, right? Because we cannot rest in the fact of what we see and the things that are happening, because it does look like we are losing, you know, on the front of it. But things are falling in place. That's something Jan Markell says, and that I always remind myself, is that, things are not falling out of place, they are falling in place. And the Lord's in control. So, all right. Well, okay. So we are in lecture 8 study tonight, and we've already gone through the very basics. And I just want you guys to know that you guys are not crazy, all right? You guys are not crazy. I'm serious. It is just that simple, and it is just that simple, really. I mean, you read the U.S. Constitution; it's simple within its simplest term, but yet you can see people do things that you're like, am I crazy or can they really do that? And I know one thing that I like to joke with my wife sometimes whenever she catches me doing something that's crazy. I am like, are you gonna believe me or are you gonna go into believe your lying eyes? So she looks at me sometimes like, and it's a joke, all right? It is a joke. I just want you to know that. But she's not crazy. She's not. So it is the art of deception, and fortunately for us, you and I know that it is, deception. And because of that, we want to do something about it. So you guys are not crazy. I mean, there is a lot of things that are happening that shouldn't be happening. I mean, legally, constitutionally, there is no foundation from it, for it. And they haven't even changed it. They just do it because they can. That's really what it is. There is no way around it. And so just reminding us about that and reminding your families and friends, just because Congress can do something or say something and do this doesn't mean legally they can, doesn't mean constitutionally they can, and show them. There is no other hidden curriculum that says they can. Everything else is their opinion. Everything else is deception, whether it is through statutes and all of these other things. It's all wrong. But fortunately for us here today, that we can filter that. Like, we can filter and we understand the very basics of our Constitution. We do not have to read we do not have to read all of these other words from fancy, eloquent people and agree with our Constitution. We can just read it and says this is what it says. So have confidence in that and believe that you guys are not crazy and we are not crazy. We have truth on our side. All right, so with that being said, Lecture 8, we went through the first 10 amendments, right? And so far now we have talked about our founding fathers' beginnings, influences, the things that influence them, the Bible and certain philosophers and just all of these people and how they came to forming our system, right? And then we also talked about just the inspiration of our Constitution and how it fits together. There is nothing that's like not cohesive, that no man could have come up with this, right? And that these men were fallible people, but yet they were able to turn to a God, and God was able to use them to say, hey, this is how this nation is to run. If we can keep it, right? If we can keep it. And there is a responsibility on our parts for us to keep it. And that's where the battle is for us, is the spiritual battle within a physical realm right now. And we have to continuously be battling that and fighting that. So, but yeah, so today we will be talking about that. But I will also like to just emphasize just one thing for us to just talk about is religious liberty, right? Which is within our First Amendment Establishment Clause, and that's where a lot of power-hungry politicians tend to want to use that as a springboard for them to be able to push whatever agenda they have, right? And then also I can always know that someone's ignorant whenever they talk about the separation of church and state. As soon as they mention that tells me exactly where they're at. And I'm like, just by that statement alone tells me that you know nothing. Absolutely nothing. So whenever they use that, I'm just like, bingo, there goes my suspicion of me thinking they were stupid. And I don't like using the word stupid. My kids know that, but yes. So let us go through lecture 1. Questions. We're going to keep it simple today. All right. Because we will be using these as, as a springboard, but also testing you guys' ability right now and how far we have come. So number 1, James Madison believed that no Bill of Rights was necessary because A, B, C, or D. You guys remember from last week's video. What do you think? B. D as in dog. Who says D? You are correct. He saw that there was no need to prohibit government from doing what it had no authority to do. That's what he saw, but praise God, because that's exactly what they're doing now, right? So I used to think that one of them was wrong and one of them was right, but it was just these men just literally reading the Bible, taking it literally that man has a sinful nature and power can corrupt absolutely, right? So they're like, well, we probably should remind them just in case. But then the other one is also like, well, writing it down kind of gives them the understanding that they might, so it's like, you know what? I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that they were able to, for us to be able to have a Bill of Rights on paper for our sake, and not so much for government's sake, right? Because we need to see that physical writing to say, oh, we do have that rights, because government can easily say, well, no, you don't, because it's not written. Well, if it's not written, logically just think it through. But they were like, you know what? Let's just make it simple for simple people like us. All right. So number 2, the lack of Bill of Rights in the original Constitution was A, B, C, or D? B, the principle of objection of the anti-federalists. So you guys understand what federalist versus anti-federalist is, right? Yes or no? No. So federalists wanted a stronger central government. Really, that's what it was. Because when the Article of Confederation, they had it during the war, it was very hard for them to be united. And it was very hard for them to come up with the idea of even funding. So because of that, they were like, we need to not let that happen again. We need to be more united, and that's where the idea of federalism was like, we should be stronger. But then also, the issue with federalism is you can have a strong central government, and then the people tend to not have any rights. So there you go, right? Okay. So number 3, each of the first 10 amendments blank federal powers in contradiction to the remaining amendments 11 through 27. A, limits. And this is where you will see our country moving away from its Judeo-Christian heritage. I would say probably starting after the 14th, 15th amendment, that's when you were like, okay, we no longer are here anymore. We are a democracy per se. So not every single amendment was good amendments. Really, that's what it was. But so, yep. Number 4, the Bill of Rights was written to limit only the blank government, the federal government. Right? Number 5, religious liberty is a blank concept. It's a biblical concept. We should remind people of this. We should remind people of this. Christianity is the most humane, most gracious, most thoughtful, most whatever, just whatever is good about life. That's what Christianity is about. And because now we are the villains. Really, we are. You know, the idea of God, and well, not even just God, but Jesus is like offensive to people. So much so that they want to cancel you, right? We need to remind people of that. And as believers, we just have to be encouraging that, you know, because all of the world atrocities that happen within our country wasn't inspired by Christians. It just wasn't. But the answers was inspired by Christian principles. I mean, the idea of slavery. And I love this conversation with people because, seriously, I always get into this conversation with people about slavery. And we talked about it. Like, we literally break it down. Yes, sir.
Do you ever get in a conversation, Alex, with people about it's the same God in all the religions?
Oh, gotcha, yes. Okay, I was like,
The question is, Alex, do you get in a conversation with people about who say that the God of Allah is the same as our Christian God? All the gods are the same. Because that's what a lot of people in society today like to believe.
so when that happened, you want to go on the offensive. You want them to explain why that is true. You never want to answer their, question for them. And basically that is what I do.
Yep.
I make them defend that statement. Show me how, really, where. That's just it, So I usually let them do that. So go ahead.
Yep. By doing that, then you'll get a better understanding of where they're coming
Yep.
from, and maybe then there'll be something you can comment on. Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
And a book called Tactics by Greg Koukl talks about exactly that, by being on the offensive, by asking questions. And he talks about how to do that. So that sounds really good.
All right, number 6, Thomas Jefferson Wall of Separation was meant to describe A, B, C, or D. There you go. All right. You mean it's not protect? You mean it doesn't mean that we cannot bring our religious, beliefs and stuff in the public square, All right. Number 7, Thomas Jefferson words are now quoted by the courts. Wow. A, B, C, or D? Out of context. So these are the people responsible for applying and, I don't even like to say interpreting because that kind of makes it seem like they have power that they don't have, right? Applying. So these are supposed to be our Pharisees, the people who study the law and know the law and apply the law and say, this is how it's supposed to be written. And this is where a lot of people either get nervous because the court's supposed to know this stuff. The court's supposed to know this stuff. So either they know it and they are just being evil or they're just ignorant. Either way, that's just it. I much rather them be evil because to think that ignorant people are in office just yeah, he just makes us the laughing stock. But yeah, so. All right, number 8. The Supreme Court test in Lemon versus Kurtzman says that the law for that says that for a law to be constitutional, it must be A, B, C, or D. All the above. So these are men saying this now, that we need to have a secular government. And this is the lie that, once again, you know, because every single law is subject to someone's morals, which is rooted in what? Religion, someone's belief. So there is no secular religion, or there is no secularism is a religion. So let's just put it like that. So the argument that we cannot have Christianity within our government is a lie and is flawed, because secularism is a religion. Religion is someone's belief. Really, that's what, really that is what religion means. Someone's belief, whether it's an individual belief or it's a group of people who have come together and says, we share these common beliefs. So that is another tactic. You can correct that false demonic, demonic idea from. Number 9, the following is not protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. A, B, C, D. D, all of the above. Nowadays, you would think you're crazy because of what's happening, right? BLM, peaceful, they are peaceful protesting, but yet the capital city, peaceful protests of a few plants, causing a scene, but yet everyone's there are crazy. And even us, when we were at the Capitol back in 2020, just peacefully there protesting, and BLM showed up and started attacking us. And the police were there watching, and they didn't want to do anything. Who were you representing? I was not representing BLM. I tell you that right now. Yeah. This was during COVID, so it was like we were at the governor's mansion like every week, sometimes twice a week. We were there, I mean, we even went there on Thanksgiving Day, and we were there just protesting, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and people started coming, So yeah, and no one got arrested. No one started fights. Yeah. All right. The right to peaceably assemble includes A, B, C, or D. Yep. All right. So let's talk about the idea of religious liberty, because this is where we have a lot of issues, because I see this coming even more. And so within our school, the college that I was at, the Muslims were praying. Like, they are welcome to pray within these schools. The schools make accommodations for them to pray. Like, they go out of their way. The college did. I think it was St. Paul College. They literally went, MCTC, sorry. They went out of their ways by giving them just the room, and they could leave class to go pray, and they could do all these things. But yet, when it came to, the Christians, having these certain objections, or even wanting to start, they wanted to start a little Bible club or whatever. The perception was that they couldn't do it. And the reason why I said that was because they were not aware of the law, right? And they do. But there is this overlapping perception that they can do it, but yet Christians shouldn't, because there is just so much opposition whenever Christians want to do anything that is within the schools. So there is this idea that, well, we cannot do that, but they can. And people kind of say it, think it, but nobody ever really want to say it. So religious liberty, and I would like to read to you this quote. It says, back in 2013, the citizens of Oklahoma passed a state constitutional amendment that bars states from considering using Sharia law in their decision. Shortly thereafter, a federal judge ruled that the law was in violation of the U.S. Constitution Establishment Clause, stopping it from going into effect. Listen closely to her reasoning. She says, while the public has an interest in the will of the voters being carried out, the court finds that the public has more profound and long-term interest in upholding an individual constitutional rights. So the idea of Sharia. Do you guys know what Sharia law is? Sharia, actually, not Sharia law. Sharia means law. So whenever we say Sharia law, we are saying law, which is, right, Sharia. So do you guys know what that is? All right, so it is an Islamic, pretty much they are governed by it. It is their own law or customs within a system. So beating their wives, cutting off people's hands for stealing, doing all of these things are within their tradition or their customs. So what is wrong with that? Because America has a different, culture. So religion itself, do we have the freedom of religion to do whatever we want? Because religious liberty has a beginning, but it also has a ending. And the common misconception is that, well, every single religion is included. So how do we answer that question, specifically regarding Islam and Sharia? Does Islam or Sharia resemble our laws? Is it compatible? Explain. It's not constitutional. Why? You remember you have to go into details with people, because simply by saying it's not constitutional, the wall just goes up right away. So you have to be simple and speak simply to people within a way that they can understand. So
it has to do with morals, doesn't it?
Yep.
We're a moral
Yep.
country, and we follow what the Bible says is moral, and that's not what Sharia is about.
Right. But do they not have their right to practice Sharia? Because that's what people argue. Well, do they not? They don't. Go ahead. I get that. I get that. There you go. So he said that it is unconstitutional because we are a nation governed by the principles of the law of nature and nature's God. And some of you who isn't aware of that is the Bible and our conscience, right? So we have a fixed standard. The rule of law within our country is a fixed standard. It is not subject to someone's opinion, someone's practice, someone's whatever, because God is the giver of our rights, and our rights come from him. Therefore, he is our fixed standard, and any single law that comes in conflict with that is not compatible with our laws.
And everyone in the Bible is loved by Jesus. The Bible, everyone is loved by Jesus. Everyone is equal before Jesus. Everyone can be forgiven by Jesus. I mean, those are some of his teachings that are incompatible with Sharia law, right? That comes from, what, some guy in a cave that heard something? Muhammad?
Oh.
And
Okay.
continue with that.
Right. I mean, beating your wife is wrong. I mean, biblically, because husbands are supposed to love their wives and to lay down their lives for their wives, and beating your wife, that's not loving, cutting off, people's hands for the sake of cutting off people's hands. Even though the Old Testament, I mean, there's some things where, okay, fine, there was a time for that, and so religious liberty isn't the freedom for us to just do whatever we want. That was not the true idea of liberty, because Webster 1828 defined liberty as doing whatever we want. I mean, the freedom for us to do what we want according to the will of God. Because that was the mindset of our founding fathers. Nowadays, the freedom or liberty is completely different. The idea of liberty is completely different. And Sabrina quoted the Declaration of Independence, and watching her say God and listening to her say God reminded me of Kamala Harris stating the same thing, but she left God out. And I'm like, whoa, she didn't, I mean, she purposely left, God out. And I'm like, did anybody else catch that, So, but that's how it is. I mean, that is the deception, and that's the lie. So, just keep it.
No, it's not for me, for Dave.
So Sharia is unconstitutional,
Right?
but so is most of our laws. So we are unconstitutional.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the idea of the federal government or the state intervening with the family, that's not constitutional either, because whose jurisdiction is the family? Well, the answer is right there, right? The family. Mm-hmm. And also, where within our Constitution does it say that the CPS should exist? Nowhere.
Yeah. So here's a question that you said ask questions is a
Yep.
good idea. So I'm going to ask you the question: jihad, is that part of Sharia law?
I'm
Yes.
trying to. There's something wrong with your question, so I'm trying to.
What the question then is, what is jihad?
There we go. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to. Okay, well, there are two ideas or lies about about jihad, and so you guys got to understand that Islam, when they are in the lower house, they preach peace and love and this and this and that. But when they are in the upper house, which is 3 to 5% of the population, they are considered the upper house, meaning they have the majority. And that's why these people populate like crazy, because that's how they take over, countries, and, societies. That's why they heavily emphasize having lots of kids, because that's how they can take over. So when they have the upper house, they are a lot more bolder. Jihad, when it's in the lower house, they will preach that let me see. It is an internal struggle, right? Like a spiritual struggle. But when they are in the upper house, the struggle becomes more practical. And that's when they start waging physical war on non-Muslims. So the only way that they can get into paradise is by jihad, one, and then the other one is gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head. I used to know this stuff. But there are two ways for them to enter into, paradise. And one of them is jihad, which is killing themselves. Yep. But yeah, so jihad is a war, whether it's physical or not. So that's how they do that. So, but any religion that comes into conflict with our laws, which is rooted in the foundation of the law of nature, nature's God, is not compatible. It's not. So Sharia cannot be. Any religion that says that we can sacrifice babies isn't rooted in the law of nature, nature's God. That very little tiny phrase that Thomas Jefferson just inserted in there, but yet nobody ever talks about it. There is no emphasis on it. People read it and just go over it. They're like, whatever, That is the fixed foundation of our laws. That is where all of our legislation, all of our court decisions, and every single aspect should be filtered through that simple phrase. I want you guys to hammer people with that. Get them educated on it. Get them to understand it. Get them to get mad at you about it. But let them know that. Somebody had a question, Deanna. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, so the law of nature and nature's God, is that the Bible? I mean, all of that, is that
Yeah, so it's the Bible and our conscience.
conscience?
Right. So the idea that man is a creation of God, and that we as human beings know consciously about our Creator. Certain things about God that we know inherently, like a baby knows that. I mean, like they know when they have done something wrong. Like you just don't have to tell a baby sometimes. Like they just know, right? But then also certain things that they don't know that you have to teach them, like to share, right? So that's kind of like that, right? Like us, human beings, stop fighting. Paul says. But instead, you guys should love, one another and do all of these things. So that is the concept that Thomas Jefferson was trying to explain to us, was that our society works like that, and through that function. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. So everything that we do should be filtered through that. Yeah. So it's a very simple concept when we just stop, think it through, because God really does have the answers for everything. And his legislation process, which our founding fathers, wanted to go by, really does answer all of life's social problems. It's not that hard. I mean, legislation isn't like the idea that we have all of these laws really just shows us how how much bondage we have come into. Because if we were to just simply rely on listening to God and our conscience of God, of God, and reading our Bible, we wouldn't have to be reminded of certain things that there has to be this statute stating that, someone, whatever it is, right? There just shouldn't be. But the idea that we have it shows that we are going into bondage. I mean, Jesus summed up the whole 613, commandment into. Do you want the 613th commandment, or you just want the 2? Which one's easier for us to remember? That's what I remind my kids about. I'm like, hey guys, do you guys want a legal relationship with me or a loving relationship? The legal relationship, hey, I am only allowed to do certain things for you. A loving relationship, you just do what I ask you. And I will feed you, clothe you, and just do that. So I teach them that now so they can understand, So religious liberty isn't for us to do whatever we want. It's not. It has a beginning. It has an end, like a stop process. And we as Christians, we need to help explain that to people, because every single religion isn't the same, and they don't have the same values. They don't have the same doctrine. But us as Americans, we have a fixed standard of laws, which is rooted within the law of nature, nature's God. And that's how we interpret all of our laws. And that's how we govern. And any single religion or beliefs that is in conflict with that, we need to reject. We need to challenge. And we need to say, that's not, no.
Christianity has freedom. That's where part of the Constitution comes from. The Bible teaches freedom. Freedom in Christ,
Freedom in Christ. Right. And that's where I always have to just encourage people. Yes, we have the freedom in Christ and in God. Apart from God, there isn't freedom. There is no freedom. There is no lasting freedom. And that is a concept that I have to remind myself too sometimes. I'm like, that's weird that apart from God, there is no freedom. So that's why you and I as believers and Christians, we need to remind people of that. Okay? All right, let's take a 5-minute break and then come back and finish up.